Well, this morning I've been sent in Metalub XRE-1000 single LED version. The report is that it's not charging, so we can plug the charger in, assume the charger is working, and connect it to the charging pins. As you can see on this one here, the charging pins are badly corroded, so they'll need cleaning, and when it's connected in, this LED light should be flashing, or on solid but flashing, which it's not. No connection whatsoever. Okay, so first thing we'll do is we'll take the top off. These just unscrew through the charging pins with a standard 4mm hex key. Unfortunately, this is quite a common thing with lithium batteries. So lithium batteries, they need to be charged on a regular basis. So if I'm going to cheat now, I'll just put the charging pins back on. So as you can see, the two charging pins connect to the circuit board, and the charging cables can go either way round. So the battery is charged, the charging circuit is inside here, so there needs to be a certain amount of power to this circuit board for the charging circuit to work. So if the batteries are allowed to drain over a period of time, then there's not enough charge onto the circuit board to operate the charging pins, so the light can't be charged. In many cases we can simply jump start the battery and put enough power into the battery cells to start the charging process. So we can see on here, if I'm going to just remove the charging pins again, and we will just check to see what's in the battery light. So with the LED, there's the LED there, with the LED uppermost in this case, the 0 volts is on the right hand side. The 0 volts of the battery cells, this is, and the positive is on this side here. And as we can see, there's absolutely nothing in the battery cells at all. So it could be that the battery cells need replacing, or we need to simply jump start the battery. So I'm going to disable the charging terminals. I've actually got a little sneaky trick here. I put some paper in the end of there so the nut doesn't go too far onto the circuit board, so I don't short the circuit board out, because bearing in mind, although there's no power in this particular battery, if there's power on the battery I don't want to touch across the pins here. So I actually have a piece of paper jammed in the end of my socket so that I don't put it on too far. Unscrew this. So for this purpose I'm going to remove the circuit board so I don't do any damage to the circuit board, because the chances are the circuit board is perfectly okay. And I can then remove the 4 screws. Again, I just want to be slightly careful that I don't drop the screws onto the circuit board and short anything out whilst it's connected to the battery. So I tend to undo them and let them fall onto the deck so that there's no chance of damaging the circuit board, or less chance of damaging the circuit board. And then the circuit board will just come out, which we can just, don't really need that at this moment in time. So we can just double check the power again. And there's nothing on the battery pack at all. We can unscrew the light, head, and the battery cells come out here. And as we can see from here, this battery pack is from 2012, so it's 10 years old. And we will just check one more time what the score is, and we've got nothing on the battery cells at all. Just going to right, so if I remove the battery cells just so you can see what's inside there, we've got a 0 volts on here through a thermal fuse. This wire is the half voltage, which is on here, so it's halfway between the battery cells. Then we have the positive wire on here, and then we have a connection wire from the light head back up to here. So we wouldn't expect anything on this particular pin here because there's no light head on there. When the light head's on there, we would expect something on there. So I'm just going to make life slightly easier for myself and put a positive sign on there, if you can see that, and that will just help me make sure that I always connect the positive to this side and the negative to this side, just whilst I jump start the battery. So we've got everything disconnected from it, so all we need to do now is see if we can pop a bit of charge into the battery cells. If not, it's a replacement charger. So let's just bring this into here. Too many bits in the way now, so I'm just going to clear a few bits out my way. Okay, let's get rid of that as well. We don't want anything to short across the battery or mess around when we're doing the battery. So I've got a negative on here, and I have got plus 12 volts on the other end, and I'm just going to literally short that across the battery and see if we can put some charge in there. And what I can do here is I'm just going to see if charge is now going into the battery cell itself. So I can connect onto there, and I've got 12 volts in the battery, which is not what I would expect. I'd expect it to be going up much slower than that. So I can remove that now and just see what's on the battery cells. And we've gone up very slightly. So this is more likely to be replacement cells required. Something's not quite what I would normally expect to see when I connect this onto here. Is a very slow and steady increase into the battery. I don't expect it to jump to 12 volts immediately. Just going to check it again. And because it is, the battery cells aren't taking a charge at all. The 12 volts is actually directly from there. So it looks like this one is going to be a replacement battery cells. And say the cells are 10 years old, so it's probably not a bad thing to replace those. So we're going to go through the whole process with you. Going to need a soldering iron for this one. I'll just pop that on. This is really not a task for the end user generally. So we get the battery replacement battery cells, put them up there out the way, up here, and we're going to have to replace, and just be careful about how we replace all the cells. So this is our half voltage. So if there's 7 volts in there, there's obviously 3.5 volts on there. As you can see, we take the battery cells from here. We can remove the tags. I purchased these from Metalub, but I wouldn't really go any other way with these ones. It's a bit of a fiddly task, and it's probably good to get the right cells. But I only get the cells, so I don't get the rest of the circuit board, etc. So there's a little bit of work to do. It's not just a simple slide, take one out, slide one in, etc. So the first thing we're going to fit is this wire here. So I'm not going to actually fit this one, I'm going to replace it with this one because it's already connected. Now this is a heat wire, so we can't apply too much heat to it, otherwise the fuse will blow. And I can't see. So just going to wait for the soldering iron to warm up. I don't want it too hot. For this purpose. So we want to be reasonably quick onto this. So let's just remove the orange wire on here, which is just a 1/2 volt wire. We can leave the black wire on for the moment, and we can disconnect the fuse wire. Now I'm going to hold this with a pair of little pinchers just so that some of the heat will dissipate through the pinchers, and we can do the job quickly and efficiently. And that's our fuse wire off. If we have damaged the fuse wire, then we've got a replacement one here ready for it. Then we can stick a marker pen on the red wire, so we know that that's the plus voltage. And we can remove the red and the black, which is not 0 volts in this case, is actually the wire going down to the circuit board down here. And then we can simply remove that assembly system in one go. And obviously we've got to refit that. Now we come down to the bottom edge. Oops. Put that onto there, and we can remove the circuit board from here. Excellent. And that's the old battery cells have been completely removed. The chances are, when you put new cells in, new cells are going to be of better ampage than the old ones. So battery cells tend to get better rather than worse. So the replacement cells should work a lot better. So the first thing we've got to do is reconnect the bottom of the circuit board. Which we can do this fairly simple. Give that a few moments to go off. Didn't solder very well. Do that again. Okay, that's a much better solder. Just leave it to go off, don't blow on it. It will cool down on its own and it will settle. Okay, and there's a pad there which we can put on, and it just folds over. So when the LED module connects to there, it's not pushing on the bottom of the circuit board. And we can fit that and make sure all that's all okay. Now we need to refit this end. We've got our two wires to go back onto here. Okay. We've got our positive wire here. We can spin it over. We've got our fuse wire still in place, which we can do. And we've got our half voltage wire here as well, which we need to put up onto here. So I haven't actually taken the end off the wire. Just do that quickly. Just tin that wire up. And that can go onto there. Okay, have a swig of coffee. So now what we've got to do is tin that part up there, which is the connection wire to the fuse. So we will just tin that up. Excellent. And this is the bit where we have to be reasonably fast and accurate, because we don't want to heat this wire up too much. Otherwise, so I'm using a pair of metal tweezers to hold the wire and to dissipate the heat. So we heat that up first with the wire disconnected, pop the wire on and then release as quickly as possible. Leave the heater, leave the pinchers on there so the heat can go up the pinchers onto your fingers, and we should be good to go. So we've got everything correct now. Our positive wire, which is here, goes to our positive line here down to here. This is, we won't expect anything on here until the head's connected. Our negative is on here through the fuse, and our half voltage is on here. So if we have done our job correctly, we can attach the wires onto there, and we see we've got 8 volts on there, so we won't have anything onto this pin here, and onto the half pin we would expect 4 volts. So we know the fuse is working, everything has gone through perfectly okay. So the fuse was okay on the old one, and it's still okay on this one. Now we just got to reassemble everything. Now all we've got to bear in mind now is that we have power here. We have to be very careful with lithium batteries because they do have an extreme amount of power into them. We could slide the old sleeve back on again, but Metal Sub do supply me with new sleeves as well. So in the pack I get a new sleeve with the battery cell. So I'm actually going to put a new sleeve on this, as this pack's here and it's got the old date on it. So I'll do that at the end. Makes life a little bit easier for me, but if you were trying to do this yourself, which I probably don't suggest, you could put your old sleeve back on again. Now I've got to assemble this back together again without shorting it out, touching the wires, etc., because if we do that, we're just going to cause all the damage, cause a lot more damage than we've done before. So it's going to be a bit fiddly to feed all this in. Sometimes it goes easy, sometimes not. I don't do this particularly often, so I don't really have a trick for it. I'm just going to push that padding in underneath there a bit better. Obviously there's a good chance that we could move something out of line along the way. As you say, it's a bit of a fiddly task, so you're probably wise just to send them back to me, because if I break something I have to replace it. If you break it, you have to buy it again. Just going to line this circuit board up a little bit better. Hasn't quite lined up nicely for some reason. There we go. So we've got all our circuit board back in line. We've still got to put the heat shrink back on, but essentially now we should be all back together again. Just going to double check that I haven't done any damage at this point before putting the heat shrink on. So I should have +8 here, which basically is a full battery, which we have. Here we won't have anything until we put the LED head on, and here we will have +4 volts. So we've managed to get that back together again reasonably okay. I can then take my new heat shrink, pop that over, he says. Should have put that on first. Okay, so we can pop that over onto there. And that's just to keep everything together. So we're going to need a heat gun now. We're just going to put that into place. And just going to slide that up a little bit. That's it. Take that out of the way. So we've got our heat shrink in. That keeps everything nicely together. Obviously once it's in the housing, it will be all clean and tidy and kept together. Another check. So we have plus voltages here. And you can't see the gauge. So we have plus there, nothing on there, and we have half the voltage on there. So that's all good, that's all working. So far so good. We can now insert this back into the light and refit the LED head here. It's worthwhile just ensuring the O-rings are okay. It's all very, very clean and tidy, this head, so it's obviously been well looked after, the head side of it. Not so much the charging pins. And we can now refit that, and that will just push into place in a moment. Now we've got the head attached, we can make sure that there's power going through the bottom circuit board. So if I pop that onto there now, I would expect 12 volts, 8 volts. Now we would expect the same 8 volts on this part because the head is now attached, and then we would have the half voltage on there. So all really good. So we've got our plus on my left hand side upwards, so there's our positive and negative up there, so they're on the highest point at the moment. We've now got to refit the circuit board, and it will fit with the LED uppermost on this particular occasion because that's where I've got my positive and negative. It's obviously very important that this goes back in correctly. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to make sure that I put that into there onto the charging pin so that it goes in nice and flat and stays in one place. I'm just going to gently try and keep this still so that it doesn't jiggle about and I don't drop anything onto the circuit board unnecessarily. Gently put those back into place. And we'll move slightly, so don't tighten these up too much in one go. Just going to nick those up. And that will just hold the circuit board in place. And then we should have all the 4 holes lined up nicely if everything is all good. And now I can then reattach put back in the screws onto here. I'm going to hold this at one angle just so I don't drop the screw onto the circuit board. And nip them up. Let's do this one. So don't do this a huge amount. So why does this happen? This happens because the charging circuit is inside this light and it's always on, always working, and the light is always on and always working, so there's no disconnection. The battery is never disconnected from the circuit board. So if I touch one of these buttons now, then the light will come on, and that's what you're doing when you're switching the light on, and you can see the light come on, etc., as soon as I touch these. So these sensors are continuously working, the light is continuously working, so even when it's in your bag and it's sat there for 6 months or so, the processing is still going on. The circuit, there's power being used all the time by this circuit board. So if you leave that light for a very long period of time, and say you've been diving and you've done your dive, the light's pretty low or the battery cell's pretty low, and we don't charge it afterwards, then after a period of time that voltage will drop and drop and drop. So we've got voltage there, which is good, we've got voltage there, which is good, and we've got the half voltage there. So everything's gone back together, and as you can see, the light actually does come on, it works, it's all working absolutely fine. So now I'm just going to attach the 2 charging pins temporarily. These are temporary charging pins, they're not the ones sent back. and reconnect the charger. And as we can see, so these pins aren't charging very well either, so they're not making these pins here need cleaning, so the whole thing needs a bit of a clean up because they're not making a good connection, but we'll deal with that in a moment. So the light's charging and it's all working. Going to remove these. So as these charging pins here, these need a clean up. So I can pull these out and remove the 2 charging pins from the user's light, and I'm going to give these a quick clean. For this I'm going to use some jewellery cleaner. Just going to pop a bit of jewellery cleaner into the holes, charging pins, and just see if we can clean these up a bit before we reassemble the light. All I'm going to do is get a little bit of wire wool, get that so that inserts into the hole, and just literally run the wire all around the hole. And as you can see, that's actually cleaned up pretty clean already. Do that a bit more. Been a bit tight on the wire wool, so I'll get some more. Get a fatter bit. You can see at the bottom of here it's actually got an O-ring on there, so we'll need to clean that and re-grease that O-ring before refitting it. And we can do the same with the other one. You can actually do this whilst it's still into the light, but it's easier to do outside for this purpose, as I've got it apart, but you don't have to. But it does show that you should wash your light in fresh water and dry the connectors before charging. So the charging process will put this coating on there. Now, I'm just going to disconnect the light and I'll work on that one in a minute. So that's the clean up side. Made a mess everywhere. So I'm just going to just quickly clean these up a little bit. Like so. Make a mess this bit. And I'm just going to apply way too much grease on there. So grease those O-rings. You don't have to put too much on, which I've done. So just wipe that off a little bit. And then they can be reinserted back into here. Now this thing here has also got an O-ring on it, so we will also do that one in a moment. So refitting the two charging points. That can go back in. There's a spring in there as well, so we can see that will go back into there. That all just lines up and pushes in. I can actually just push those into place, and that will just rotate the pin round as we need to. Perfect. There's the LED. The LED on the circuit board will shine its light through there and then through to there, so we must make sure we get that the correct way around. If we clean this up, we can now apply some silicone grease to the O-ring. Don't want to put too much on. Make sure it goes all the way around. And we can now reattach this back onto there. So the LED is upwards again. The LED is upwards here, and the LED light is going to shine through there. So I just want to gently push that onto place. Just check that the O-ring has seated correctly. We'll wipe up the extra in a minute, and then we can tighten these back up. Now don't over tighten these, and I tend to tighten one side at a time, a little bit at a time, so it pulls itself evenly on both sides. If you do tighten these up too much, you're a bit heavy-handed, you will find that it will break the bolt the other side. So just nip them up. I tend never to use this end of the thing. I just gently, little bits at a time on each side, till you find that's probably good enough. We can then clean off all the grease, etc. The light's back together. If we turn it on, we get our green shining here. Light's obviously on, and we can just take it through its process and make sure we get two brightnesses, and everything is working. Now we can just pay our attention to the charger. So the charger pins weren't working brilliantly. They're not too mucky, but we could do with it disconnected from the power. Obviously make sure there's no power connected. We can just quickly drop some jewelry cleaner onto here. Get ourselves a bit of wire wool, and we can gently just give that a little bit of a clean. Just to clean the ends and make sure that's going to connect nicely in a minute. Clean that up. I'm going to reconnect this to the power just to make sure, but we did have power. And if I now connect this to there, we got a connection, and we got a solid green light. Oh, that's probably difficult for you to see. Yeah, we've got a solid green light to say that's charging. When it's fully charged, it will flash green, and there's no point really leaving them plugged in to the wall once that's flashing green, because it is fully charged at that particular point. So save a bit of power, save the circuitry from doing too much. So the trick is dive with the light. Once you've dive with light, clean the terminals here with fresh water, dry the terminals, and then attach the charger. Fully charge the light. Once it's fully charged, you can then just disconnect the charger and disconnect the two pins here. I'm going to leave that charging now. Then I will do a rundown on the light burn, do a burn test on the light, charge it again. I'll probably do that 2 or 3 times and just see how the light's operating, but basically that's good to go. So I'm going to leave that charging and tidy up. Thanks very much for watching.